I'm Katie. I'm the general manager here at ADAC. And before we get started, I have to do a couple of housekeeping items. I know some of you have been here for the other two presentations. Apologies, but I have to do this part. Grab a copy of your event guide so that you know what is happening this week. If you're not already registered for events, go ahead and register because things do sell out. And if you need any help from our team, just grab one of us. I want to remind everyone of two fun parties that we have going on this week. Tonight is the Hibachi grand opening of their expansion of their showroom. So visit us tonight for that party. And then tomorrow night is the Southeast Designers and Architect of the Year meet and greet. And that will be at Ernest Gaspard. So details are in this event guide. Also have some fun with us on social media. Take pictures and videos and be sure to use our hashtag DesignADAC and tag us at ADAC Atlanta so that we can make sure that we're sharing all the fun that's going on. And in your event guide, this thing is really important. We have all of our handles for our speakers, our media partners, and our showroom partners. So tag everyone in there and tell everybody how much fun you're having. I want to thank the Jane Group for our lovely stage decor this market. All of the product can, of course, be found at ADAC, and if you would like to know where all the resources are, there's a resource guide in the back of the room. I'd like to thank our sponsors today. That's Curry & Company and Upcountry. Don't forget that after this panel presentation, we will go upstairs to Suite 401 Upcountry, and Paloma will be signing her books as well. I want to thank our media sponsor, that's Modern Luxury Interiors and The Atlantan. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Caroline Bentley Edwards, Editor-in-Chief.
Thank you so much, Katie. Well, welcome everyone to Design ADAC. I'm so happy to be back here as a moderator again. And as Katie said, my name is Caroline Bentley Edwards, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Modern Luxury's Interiors Atlanta and The Atlantan, which are both sponsors of this talk. When Jenna, the publisher of Interiors, and I were ruminating on what we wanted to bring you guys this spring, we knew we wanted to put forth something that was inspirational and aspirational. Something that represented Modern Luxury Interiors Atlanta's modern style and our mission to bring you something fresh, new, and cutting edge. We landed on a question that we kept asking ourselves over and over again, which is, how do you accomplish both modern and traditional, especially here in the Southeast? And I know you guys have projects way outside the Southeast, but you're based in Houston and Nashville in the South. It's definitely an interesting thing to navigate. So whether at a trend or simply in our region, the Southeast loves traditional styles. So we reached out to two of our favorite designers who in our eyes have perfected the blend of these two worlds. We are so excited to have you guys here today. First, we have Paloma Contreras visiting us from Houston and Chad James visiting us from Nashville. Welcome, you two.
Thank you.
If you wouldn't mind giving a short introduction to our audience, should they not already know who you are, and give us a little insight into your journey of how you came to the stage today. Chad, we'll start with you.
So my group is called Chad James Group. We're based in Nashville, Tennessee. We are in our 13th year of business in Nashville, and my career started early on in '98, and I had the privilege of working for some pretty notable design firms before I branched out and started my own firm. Nashville has been home for us and has been a place that is very easily travelable from, if that's a word, because most of our work is not in the state of Tennessee. We travel all over the United States, Cayman Islands, and Mexico. I, for years, have spoke on panels, and I got the privilege to be here today to speak to you guys and with Paloma here, and so it's just wonderful to be here to talk to you.
Thank you so much, Chad. All right, Paloma, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself.
Sure. I'm Paloma Contreras, interior designer based in Houston, Texas. Design is actually a second career for me. I was formerly a high school Spanish teacher and ended up feeling very creatively stifled. I've told this story. It's a long and winding road. Sure, you can find a podcast or something somewhere where I've shared the full story, but design has always been a passion of mine, and I've been very lucky to call it my career and my day-to-day job for the last 11 years. We're based in Houston, but we work on projects sort of up and down the East Coast, into Chicago, down into Florida quite often, as well as in our hometown of Houston. And I also have a store called Paloma & Co. in Houston, as well as online. And my second book The new classic home just came out in October, and I'll be signing copies at Upcountry Home right after the panel.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. We're really happy to have you both here. So off the top, just before we get into like the nitty gritty of everything, and this is an open-ended question to the both of you, how do you define modern and traditional in the context of your work, and how do you define these influences in the way that you approach your design?
Well, I don't know that it's like a super strict definition. I think the intersection, which is kind of the topic of our conversation today, to me, equates timelessness. It's that mix of things from different styles and eras and provenances that come together. Sometimes you might bring things together that seem disparate, and you may not have initially thought that they would go together, but they do, and they create this sort of tension in a room that makes it feel really special and layered and personal. It's a blend of eclecticism and, I think, like I said, timelessness, and it's not strictly modern in the sense of like uber modern, but things that could be more clean lines or more relaxed, and traditional things are those that are rooted in a sense of classicism, for me anyhow.
I would totally agree. You know, design terms are they're not universal, because if I was to go through the room and ask you all what modern is to you, every single one of us would kind of have a common thread in that question, but we'd probably point to different things. And I'm definitely that person, because when I think of modern, my first thing that I think about is art. What is modern art to me? And so then that starts paving the road to, well, what's modern fashion? And then what is modern colors and textures? And so then it trickles down to what is modern interior, and how do I take what I think that is and mingle it in with something that is a traditional or transitional look. My career has always been one that, you know, it's collected. And I think that's way overused, of course, and curated is way overused. I think we're all so exhausted with that term. But the truth is, you know, the work that we do is always meant to be this look that is comfortable, but yet that it is traveled, and it feels as though you've gone on the great trip, and you've gone on the great journey to find the wonderful things that you're getting to live with each day. And the only way that you do that is by mixing different styles and different eras. I don't think any of us want one home that's all one thing. And so in doing so, that allows us to marry these worlds of different designs together.
Wonderful. I mean, I can tell you as a writer, I'm constantly looking for a synonym to curated and collected, because you can only use it so many times.
Right.
All right. Paloma, we're going to focus on not necessarily this project. This is just an example of your work, but more about how you emphasize the balance of antique pieces in contemporary spaces. Can you elaborate on that approach, and how do you achieve this balance?
Well, I think, like I said before, there's sort of a tension that each room needs, and that, to me, comes from a sense of bringing in items that aren't necessarily all so similar. I'll give an example. I was visiting a client. We'd done a home for them in New Jersey, and they live in Houston, and he'd worked with another designer years ago on his Houston house, and it just made me feel so uncomfortable, because I love French antiques, but everything in every room was antique, down to the sofas. And so it felt like I was in an antique shop or a museum, and I just couldn't exhale. I couldn't relax. So I think there has to be a ratio. I don't know that there's a specific golden ratio, but maybe for every 3 contemporary pieces, you sprinkle in an antique, or for every couple of antiques, you bring in a graphic piece of modern art. And your eye, depending on your level of tolerance and your specific style, your visual DNA, that ratio will be different for me than it might be for Chad or for the next person in the audience. And I think it's just editing. You know, as designers, we're editors, and so you keep refining and refining until it feels like it's reached a good level of balance.
Following back, this is a project of yours, just multiple different photos from it. Can you tell us a little bit more about this project in particular? And just overall, where do you source antiques? Where did that passion start, I guess?
Sure. Well, this project is located just outside of Houston on several acres in a little town called Fulshire. And I did this house for a client that I'd previously worked with on their old home. And she came to me, and she has always liked kind of a high contrast palette with not a lot of color, more graphic, black and white. She loves things that have a patina and sort of a soul and are old, and she also loves graphic modern art. So for me, these kinds of projects are really fun because a lot of people come to me and they want slightly more traditional things and chinoiserie wallpaper and a more feminine approach. So I actually secretly really love doing more modern and more clean line things because I don't get to do them as much. And this house is out on acreage with beautiful oak trees and a creek. And at the time that we started working on this, which might have been 2018, 2019, something like that, it took a couple of years. The farmhouse aesthetic was so big. And of course, I sort of recoiled at the idea of farmhouse because it was everywhere. And I don't want to do things that are super trendy for my clients. They're investing so much time and money and energy into building a home that you want to create something for them that will stand the test of time. So we decided we weren't going to use that word or that phrase, and instead I said, we're going to take an organic modern approach. We're really going to focus on materials in this house. It's going to be super clean lined. Sure, it will have that kind of country aesthetic, but we're going to do it our way. And so this ended up in the new book, and we're really proud of it. We sourced a lot of reclaimed materials. There's Texas white oak beams and flooring. There's French oak flooring and beams in a couple of places in the house. We utilized French limestone and some other really beautiful stones throughout the house. So it's really kind of a love story to the materiality of Texas, as well as some of these other influences that she and I both loved. My love of antiques, I will say, has an Atlanta connection.
Oh, good.
I went on a shopping trip with the ladies from Huff Harrington in 2017. It was my first shopping trip abroad, and these lovely ladies do these wonderful shopping trips. And we were in Paris and just outside of Paris for 7 days, and I was a little bit nervous because I was going with a bunch of women I'd never met, and I thought, well, this can either go really well or it might be a little weird. I'm sort of an introvert. And it was fabulous. And I made lifelong friends from that trip that I still keep in touch with. And I really tapped into a passion for antiques, specifically French and continental antiques on that trip. And since then, in 2019, I opened my store. And part of that was born out of a love for finding beautiful, unique objects on my travels, and that trip was a big part of it. So
I love it.
Yeah.
As a writer and an editor and a journalist, what you've said in all of the things that you just noted is that there's a story. The house tells a story, the antiques have a story behind them, and I think that plays a huge role in interiors, and it just makes my heart sing. All right, Chad, we're gonna move on to one of your projects. You're known for crafting rooms that strike a balance between style and personality. How do you ensure that your designs reflect the unique personalities and tastes of your clients while still embodying a transitional style?
It's funny, there's always this unwritten balance that's between what you want as the designer and architect and what the client who's paying you all this money to create this special, wonderful place that they think is their home. And I say they think it's their home because, let's be honest, they're our little babies, right? These projects that we spend 3 and 4 and 5 years on, they're toddlers. By the time we get them done, of course, we're ready to shoo them along. But in the beginning stages, they really are so much of who we are as designers. And so, for me, I've been very blessed with clients that have come to me with pretty established art collections already. And so you'll see in the work that we do, there's usually a pretty strong presence of art. And it's usually a mix. It's not always contemporary, it's not always modern. There'll be impressionistic, there'll be this really nice rounded collection. And so when you have that to work with, to me, it makes everything else simple. Our hardest projects are when a client comes and says, I have nothing. Because I'm like, oh, wait, you have nothing? Nope, nothing. And so then I have to pretend that I'm the person that is living in the house, and I'm curating, and I'm collecting, and I'm doing all that foraging and trying to find all those beautiful pieces. So like this project in particular, it's a project that I did years ago. It's a pretty monumental house in Nashville. And it's called the Fountain House because there's this massive, huge fountain in the front of it that the owners of Life and Casualty Insurance built this house many, many years ago. They wanted to have the largest home in Nashville, and they did for many years. And so our clients bought the home, and the family before, they had just got back from Versailles, and they decided they wanted to build Nashville's Versailles. And if you can imagine how that turned out, you'd be exactly correct. The moldings over the front doors of the house were cherubs that were life-size babies, and it was a lot. And so my mom always taught that, when you're getting ready to go out for the day, you look at yourself in the mirror and you probably take one or two things off, because guess what? Knowing me, you've overdone it. And still I hear her in my head every day, like, yeah, take that off. You don't need all that. And so it's the same thing with these houses that we are so graciously granted the opportunity to be a part of. And this one in particular, we edited and just pulled it all back to the structure that it was. And then we allowed the art to really be the presence that guided the interiors throughout the house.
Mm-hmm. It's stunning, and I can see they have it's a lot of contemporary art, but also
It is.
if you look at the photos, there's still that like antique feel and look to some of the light fixtures and things like that.
And that's what's nice about this particular client. She loves antiques, and she really pressed me to be able to mix those two worlds together. When the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, when their estate went up to auction, this client was fortunate to be there and at Sotheby's, and she bought many pieces. And some of the pieces are awful. I mean, just god awful stuff that, like, why do we even have this? But it was theirs. And so, we had to figure out a way to maneuver those pieces in with the contemporary art and then also the other antiques in the house.
Well, you did a beautiful job.
Thank you.
All right, Paloma, we're going to go back to you. I know we've mentioned your book a ton, but Paloma's book, The New Classic Home, literally has the title, Modern Meets Traditional Style. Outlined in the book are 4 main techniques for achieving a perfectly balanced room. We've also talked a lot about balance. Could you walk us through these techniques and explain how they contribute to the overall transitional style of a room?
Sure. So it's just overarching themes like scale and color. What else do we talk about? Tension, creating tension. These overarching themes, and how you can flip through this book, and specifically like any of my work. Chad and I were talking about how neither of us really feels like we have a specific style, like we're not pigeonholed in a specific style, but certainly everything is sort of executed through a lens. But you can see if you go through something that's more modern in my portfolio or more classic in the portfolio, the principles are still there. They still apply. So regardless of what that ratio is for you in terms of how much modern versus how much traditional do I mix into my home, when you work within the parameters of these overarching rules or themes, you're going to get a home that looks beautiful and feels put together and stands a test of time.
I want to talk, this is kind of off book, but I want to talk specifically about color.
Yeah.
Because I don't know about you guys, but I think for a lot of people, when you think modern, the thing that pops in my mind is a white box. So what are some ways to apply, like what's a modern color, and ways to apply that in modern design? Both of you can answer this.
Well, I'll tell you, my personal home, my existing home right now, about 5 years ago, this conversation came up because it's like, okay, modern, it's a modern structure, it's contemporary, and I didn't want a white house. I didn't want everything sterile. And so my goal was to take this contemporary box and then really tone it down with antiques. And then I thought about what the juxtaposition of white is. I didn't want to go black, and I didn't want it to be a char color, so I found the darkest, if you know my career, you know there's a color that I talk about a lot, and it's the darkest color of a magnolia leaf. It's like so green that it's mistaken to be black. And so what I did is I had this idea for my personal home. Why don't I just if I could drop my house down in this bucket of paint and just pull it out? Well, it's the same thing as an all-white house. So it's white on the outside, it's white on the inside. And so what I did is I did this really dark color, and literally blanketed the entire house, interior and exterior. And there's a big misconception about neutrals. Neutral, when we hear the word neutral, we all probably think, oh, it's flax or it's tan or it's khaki or it's a neutral palette. But dark colors can be a neutral color as well. Any color can be a neutralizer. And so that's a very easy way to take a contemporary structure and just blanket it in one thing. It could be blue. I mean, it could be anything, but it definitely just causes everything else to neutralize.
Yeah, I mean, it also, I feel like, makes it moodier.
It does.
Even though it's a neutral color, there's
Right.
something about it that makes it moodier and more homey just because of the color. Paloma, do you have anything to add on color?
No, I mean, I think using sort of a monochromatic approach makes anything feel a little bit more modern. Just in that sense. And I do think every room can benefit from a hint of something dark, usually black, but it can be magnolia green or it can be navy blue, but having a darker color, even if it's just like an accent in a painting or an accent fabric, that kind of grounds the space and it lends a little bit of gravitas that you'll find just makes the room that much better.
Yeah, I love that. All right, going back on books, sorry. Had my own personal inquiry. So both of you work on projects nationally and internationally. We were just talking about how you have the Cabo situation, and you do a lot of projects in Mexico and all around the country as well. This project in particular is, I think, in New Jersey, is that correct?
It is, yes.
How does the location play into your design direction? Obviously, this is a coastal design.
It's a huge factor. It's one of the biggest factors, I would say. We work all over the place, and as you travel from one location to the next, there's always an identity associated with a location, an architectural vernacular. You have to think about the materiality of that place. Like, if we're in Florida, we use a lot of coquina or coral stone, which we wouldn't be using at a beach house in New Jersey, even though they're both beach locations.
Right.
So it influences a lot. I mean, you think about the history, you think about the spirit, I like to say, the spirit of a place and how that might impact how you bring the outdoors in and honor the locale through the design.
Tell us about this project. I see there's a lot of blue through lines and a lot of wood.
Yeah, so this is a beach house on the Jersey Shore in a little town called Avalon, which is sort of the southernmost tip of the Jersey Shore. The client lived in Houston, but he grew up in New Jersey, and at the height of the pandemic, he bought this spec house, sight unseen, on a whim, so that he and his young family would have a place to go should we be in a pandemic situation again. And so now they really use it. In the summers, they'll spend the whole summer there. They'll go for holidays, and it's right on the beach. It's very typical of what you would imagine a beach house to be, clad in shiplap and clapboard and all kinds of millwork that gives it sort of that loose, beachy vibe. But again, we didn't want to approach it from a place that felt thematic or expected. So we chose a lot of contemporary furniture. We went with a lot of we had some traditional elements too. It felt very, very cozy. We tinted the ceiling in there, or the whole room in the master bedroom, to make it feel really, really cozy. And he had a wonderful collection of modern art. So we had Ellsworth Kelly pieces and Anish Kapoor pieces to work with, which was really fun and made my job just that much more interesting. But that sort of served to punctuate the spaces in a way that I think only art and lighting can really. Those are the things that make a space pop.
All right, Chad, I'm going to ask you about all of your international projects, as well as, I know we were literally just talking about this before, but common challenges that you face when doing a project on location somewhere far from your home or your home base.
Sister, we don't have enough time. I have my team here with me today, and I have one person on my team that all his job is logistics. He literally is the eyes, ears, and nose of making sure that everything that we order gets from point A to point B, which, if you know me, you know that that's a challenge because I'm constantly buying and I'm constantly shooting an email saying, hey, where is this and why isn't this here, or I'm getting on an auction or something like that. One of the hardest things, though, traveling internationally, or even in the U.S. is transportation. It's getting the things from point A to point B. Because no matter where the project is, I mean, if you're doing a project in Aspen, you're not going to shop in Aspen. I mean, there's just nothing other than a blanket and a candle. You're not going to shop there for it. So everything has to be imported to that place. And it's the logistics. It's the portion, I think, that's one of the hardest things of every one of our jobs is getting things from point A to point B. But once you get it there, it's like, okay, the job's not over because guess what? Now this is broken, or this didn't show up, or, this got hijacked on the highway from San Diego to Cabo, or, I mean, I'm not joking. I mean,
True
it's like,
story.
you can't make these things up. And so it's those type challenges that, as a business owner who is extremely protective of my team, I have to look at the profitability, and I have to go, okay, do we really want to embark in these type of journeys? It has to be a really exceptional client and a really exceptional place for us to, at this point in this juncture, to do these projects because, we think that it's all COVID-based, but we're in a new world now past COVID. We all think differently, and yes, lead times have gotten better, and yes, we can get things quicker, but guess what? Those challenges are still there.
What about, I know we talked about Cabo again, of course, but how does the space influence your design? Are you being more modern, more traditional, or?
Well, I'll tell you, like this project that you
This
have
is
up
in
here is
Chicago.
in Chicago,
Yeah.
and the golden color that's happening there, the first time I saw this space, it was in the afternoon, and this is on the 27th floor of a building, and it overlooks the water, but yet you're still seeing like the golden glisten of the lights at night. And then you have this really dark, moody blue that's happening. When we are on location at jobs, I tend to start looking around immediately going, okay, what is my inspiration with color? And ironically, there's a color palette that you'll see a lot in our work. And it tends to be, a spruce color, it tends to be a sky color, and there's definitely a bark color of trees, and there's all these different elements from nature that play into what we do. But there's always this one, I call it the bastard color. I know that's not nice to say, but that's what it is. It's that color that you walk into the room and you go, okay, where did that come from? And it's always one of these colors in a project that then ends up finding its way through the weave of the tapestry. So it starts in the entry, and then you'll probably see that little guy, pop up in the primary bedroom, or you'll see it pop up again in a bathroom. But it's this way to tie these color palettes that, because so much of it is about nature, that color palette can begin to become monotonous. And so we like to put it on its edge and then throw in another something that takes it from being what our other projects are.
Yes, and then this is the same project.
Correct.
The nursery I love too.
Thank you.
It's such a modern nursery with such
Right.
beautiful art. I guess I'm assuming the colors palette was inspired by the art.
It is.
Yeah, I figured.
Well, let me go back. It goes back to the pillow fabric that's on the bed. That's Pierre Frey.
Oh, okay.
And that was found first. And then ironically, we found the piece of art as well. So.
Love it. I love when things work out
I
like
know.
that. All right. Paloma, these are just some of more of your projects, and I just have a final question for the both of you, and I'll let you both speak to it. What advice would you give to aspiring designers who are interested in mastering transitional design in their work and finding their own unique voice in a space?
I think you have to be a voracious learner in life as a whole in order to be a successful designer, because there's always something to be learned. There's always a new detail to notice. There's always an inspiration to be found. I mean, regardless of where you are, you just have to be willing to open up your eyes and be willing to grow from the inspiration that you're exposed to, whether that is in someone else's design office that you're working for, on your travels, opening up books, learning about the top interior designers of the last 100 years and why they're important, studying architecture. I mean, anything and everything. I think just wanting to learn, having that thirst is what separates those who are good from those who are great.
I think that's great advice. Chad?
I totally agree. I would say that, in our society, we really pay attention to celebrating our victories. And one of the things that we do not do is we don't celebrate our failures. And, I'm 49 years old, having lost, I talk about this usually always, I weave it in somewhere, because my parents were such great inspirations to me in my career. And after I lost them, there was a transition that happened within me where I realized that my losses and my failures were just as important as my victories. And so as a young designer or someone who's aspiring to have, to be a designer or in architecture or own a business or whatever it is, be easy on yourself. Give yourself grace. We all deserve it. And we all deserve a moment to be able to step back and go, okay, I did this really well, and guess what? I did that really, really awful. Now learn from that mistake and that awful moment, and then springboard from that and make yourself better.
Both great answers. That's the end of my questioning. I'm going to open the floor up to you guys to take a couple Q&A questions. So if you have a question for Paloma, Chad, or both, just go ahead and raise your hand, and Katie will run over to you with the microphone. Oh, we have one right here.
So I live in Chattanooga, but 2 of my 3 children live in Nashville. They work there. And I just want your take on the new Nashville, how things have changed since COVID. My daughter's in the design industry over there, and we all know what Franklin has become. So I would like to know what you see going on in Nashville and how that's affected design with the influx of people from California and all of that.
Sure. Well, to be very frank and honest, there are many we were talking about this earlier. Nashville is an amazing city. We're a melting pot of people from California and Oklahoma and New York and all over. And for that, we're a much better city. What we're not great at is, I'm currently renovating a 104-year-old house in a historic neighborhood that's in a historic overlay that I am so governed right now. I mean, overly governed, and it's fine. But what's happened in our city is we have people who want to bring in a new element of design and style that is not necessarily in keeping with what our community is. And so we're tearing down at a rapid rate historic and monumentous architecture in our city. And they did this before years ago. Tennessee's very fortunate to have 2 presidential homes. Well, 1 now because one was tore down. And it was tore down just because, guess what? They wanted to build a 1960s library there. And so it's happening again in our city. Again, I love everyone that's moved there, but it has definitely caused our city to have a different view of what we need to be doing. And finally, in this calendar year, we're starting to see change from a standpoint of protection. Protection of structures that, and it's not just homes. I mean, it's commercial space as well. We're finally getting to a point that we're getting protection for some of those things so that we don't lose that history.
Thank you. Okay.
Hi. Thank you, both of you. So in extension from the previous question and from your previous comment, I want to know, as part of that protection, have designers from the area utilize their talents and strategies to become, to protect the vibe, the designing culture of that area? So have they been more selective about which clients they would take? Have they been selective about what type of designs that they will utilize in the architecture of the landscapes? What strategies have designers in that area begun to use to as they form to safeguard the design culture within the area. There was a previous lecture last year that talked about that, but specifically from Atlanta, about some of the challenges that designers are facing with those who migrate, seeming to want to bring that culture or change it, or the challenges. So I just wanted to know, what are the strategies that the designers are using to contribute in safeguarding the culture? Thank you.
Well, I'll say, this isn't just happening in Nashville. This is Atlanta. This is Houston.
It's Houston,
This is
yeah.
everywhere. I mean, this is Dallas. It's everywhere. I think that what we all have to be very mindful of is that we have a generation of youngsters that are, and I sound like a grandpa right now. 49 has hit real hard, by the way. It's never bothered me, but this one, for some reason, I was like, how did I get here? But my point being is, it's happening everywhere. And it is our responsibility to make sure that we are all passionate about what we're passionate about. Because listen, there's people that are just as passionate about historic and protection as there are people that are really passionate about brand new, contemporary, tall and skinny structures, right? Because if they weren't passionate about it, guess what? They wouldn't be being built. And so there's a conversation on both sides of the fence. I think that it's important that whatever side you're on is that you stand firm on what you believe. And if you are one of the people that wants to do a extremely contemporary home, well, then maybe you do it in a place that's not a protected area. We finally, in Nashville, we have a couple of organizations that are designer driven, that are now paying very close attention to endangered structures in our city. And it really has started with people just going, okay, this is my neighborhood, and I don't want to live across the street from X, Y, and Z. I don't want to see, all of these 1920s homes gone to see something that's brand new. So I do think that in all of our communities, it's just having awareness. And it's also making sure that you are staying connected with your city and your city codes department, and also the city preservation.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not a problem, like you said, that's specific to one city, but I live in Houston, and Houston is a young city compared to many others, and it has no reverence for its past. So it's very common in Houston. We also have no zoning. So you can have a house next to a gas station, next to a nail, there's no zoning. So it's always been very, very hard to police things. And in the last 5 or 6 years, I would say we're seeing at an alarming rate a lot of beautiful, old, important, architecturally important houses being knocked down in favor of white modern boxes. And again, someone may love contemporary architecture, and it's not about traditional versus contemporary. My argument is, if you're going to tear something down, you have to put something of equal or better quality in its place.
Absolutely.
And oftentimes, the reason why developers love these clean line contemporaries that we're all seeing in all of our cities that are taking the place of 1920s houses is because they're cheaper to build. You don't have millwork, you don't have moldings, the materials, the quality. I mean, we looked for a house personally for a year, and I remember just getting so upset. I just knew too much because the price tags on these houses were so high, and yet I knew the quality of the finishes did not equal the price that they were asking. So I don't know that it's any one person's job. I think it's a cultural shift in a negative direction, unfortunately. We've all become so accustomed to, I need X, Y, and Z this morning. I'm just going to order on Amazon, and I'm guilty of it. Every morning as I'm getting ready, I remember all these things that we need. My daughter needs wipes. We need, whatever. And I'll just order it from my phone. It's this instant gratification that we all seek out, and I think sometimes replacing something that could potentially be lovingly restored is the harder path, and people aren't willing to take that path. They want the path of least resistance. I think, to Chad's point, all we can do is be passionate and speak out and try to educate our clients where we can, but ultimately, we're not fully in control of that. I think people need to educate themselves about just building quality houses. And again, old houses aren't always salvageable. Sometimes things are beyond repair. Sometimes the cost of fixing something is just astronomical and it wouldn't make sense to a family, or they're not conducive to the way that a modern family lives, but you can still build. I mean, look at the work of Gil Schaefer, or here in Atlanta, Stanley Dixon. Like, these guys are amazing at building houses that have the character and the quality of old homes, but suited to modern day living. And, you know, I think we could all do better.
And trust me, there's a sucker born every day. I'm one of them. The house that we are doing in Belmont right now, it literally was a tear down, and it could not be torn down because it was in a historic overlay. And so I'm the guy that, you know, literally we have rebuilt this house from the cellar all the way up. Everything is new except for the 4 walls on the outside. By the time we're done, those will be new as well. And real quickly, it's also not just about homes and structures. This conversation goes deeper. It goes deeper into furnishings. It goes into art. It goes into accessories. We are a culture of mass consumption, and we like to buy it, and when we're done with it, what do? We throw it away and we send it to a landfill, because guess what? We don't have to think about it anymore. But really, what we should be doing, in my opinion, is let's get back to the stage where our grandparents were, where they worked really hard for a really nice sofa. And that sofa was passed down to my mother, and then it was passed down to my sister. And guess what? That sofa got reupholstered about 14 times. And you know why? Because it was quality. Just like with structures and homes, it's quality. It lasts. And so if we get our mindset back into not being so mass consuming and so mass disposing, then I think we start correcting the problem in other areas as well.
I think that's why conversations like we had today are so important, so that you guys can all take this concept and knowledge and disperse it. Okay, I think, do we have time for one more? We have time for one more question. Anyone wants to, right here, perfect.
I'll stand so I can see y'all.
Yeah.
If a client doesn't come to you with their own art collection, how do you go about choosing what's going to go on the walls? And if you do buy art, do you buy from artist studios or galleries, or a mix, or how do you decide that?
Yeah, definitely a mix. I think a big part of the design process for us anyhow is getting to know the client and their tastes and what they're drawn to. Art is obviously very, very personal, probably the most personal element that will go into a home. So it's really a conversation and looking at things together and figuring out what works in terms of the design. I mean, we don't want like decorative art that just fits the palette. Sometimes it's a conversation piece. It's something that adds a little bit of juxtaposition or tension into a space. And we source from local galleries, from artists that we work with. I represent over 30 emerging American artists in my store. That's certainly a passion point for me. So from a variety of places.
You know, I was very fortunate. I did not grow up in a wealthy family, but what I did is my mother was an artist, and she believed in true art. And from the age of birth till 25 years old, my sister and I both, for every birthday and Christmas, my parents gave us a piece of real art. Now, don't be fooled. None of it was like crazy expensive, but it was all stuff that had meaning, and it all had passion behind it, or it spoke to something of the time. And so when I was 25 years old, I literally inherited 50 pieces of art. And I had art before I had furniture in my first apartment. I mean, really, I didn't have a sofa, but I had a beautiful gallery wall, right? And so what I try to do with our clients is, because not every client has the budget to have Anish Kapoor or Damien Hirst, but what they do have the budget for is to make sure that we are buying and that we're guiding them to real, true art. Not mass produced. I believe, leave the wall blank until you save or until you have the budget to put something that is authentic in your home, because you're going to love that. You're going to never get tired of it. And if you do get tired of it per se, guess what? I have never lost money in art. If you buy real art, you can always sell it for what you paid for it. Always. Art always appreciates. Always. So when you look at it with our clients, that like, especially the husbands who like to look at investment and they think of, you know, you buy a sofa and by the time, it's like a car, right? You take it off the showroom floor and guess what? That used sofa is now just a used sofa because it's not an antique. And so no one wants to pay what you paid for it originally. Art's a different story. When you buy something that's real, and something of value, and someone who has maybe a little bit of a pedigree or a little bit of a history, maybe they've been in a show or two, then that piece can definitely add to the portfolio of wealth later on.
Awesome. Well, just round of applause for you guys. Thank you so much for being here with us today.